Me personally, I actually find myself to be a pretty even split in terms of identifying as a Filipino and a Canadian. I think for sure when it comes to cultural values, I lean towards the Filipino side, when it comes to sports, when it comes to the arts, to music. I love, I was raised on the music of my parents, so of course I love the Beatles, Air Supply, Lionel Richie. In terms of food, I'm an avid rice eater. So in terms of cultural values, I really identify as being, of course, Filipino. I think where the Canadian side kicks in really is in terms of modern issues and modern values, things maybe of diversity, things of we're looking at gender roles, beauty standards, those progressive ideas. I think I really got that from my Canadian side and growing up here in Canada.
I want to say I would identify myself as more Filipino. I think when people first ask me, where am I from? I say Philippines, even though I wasn't even born there. But I always say I'm Filipino. I rarely say I'm Canadian, unless I'm outside of Canada. Because I'm the only, or growing up, my family was the only one living in Canada. We would identify ourselves among my family as the Canadians. So everywhere we go, we're the Canadians, but in Canada, I'm the Filipino.
I'm gonna say I identify myself more as a Filipino, right? I understand when you're in a group setting and they ask you where you're from. I'm gonna say I'm Filipino, but then I may not speak the language fluently. I understand it. I'm in that setting where they could be like, maybe my passport's not from the Philippines, right? But I'm gonna say I'm Canadian, but I'm gonna say I identify myself more as a Filipino, right? Filipino Canadian, right? Because it's something that I can't hide, right? Those are where my values came from. That's how I grew up. My mom and dad raised me that way, right? Like I said, later on when I grew up, I gravitated more towards having more Filipino friends. So me noticing the similarities between all of us, like what we've been through, what we're going through, right? Like, I relate, regardless if regardless if they were born back there or here. So, we all came up with those type of values, right?
I went in the Philippines. Actually, it's funny. I was supposed to go this year, December time, to visit my family there, but obviously because of the pandemic, I was unable to. So the last time I went to the Philippines was 2012, 8 years ago, and it was a wonderful time. Of course, I have a lot of family there, and they treat me very well. But it's been quite some time since I last been to the Philippines, but I'm hoping to change that sometime soon.
Last time I went to Philippines was in 2004. I was 7 years old. It was a really long time ago, and I haven't been since. I would like to go again, though, hopefully soon, whenever COVID's over. I want to do a whole Filipino trip. I want to see my whole family. I haven't seen my Lola and Lolo since I was 7 years old, so it's been a really long time.
The last time I went to the Philippines was 2007, so it's been a long while, right? I'm pretty sure I'd be outdated, right? Outdated on what's there right now, but now that I'm more grown up, I can definitely say I learned to appreciate things a lot more, so I know I'm gonna have a better time the next time I visit there.
Yeah, so I think cultural differences do affect friendships, especially when you're talking about not being able to understand or relate with another's culture. So for example, and like I said, I love using the example of food, right? Because that's such a very specific Filipino thing. Having a friend come over and introducing them to Filipino cuisine, but maybe they don't like it because they're not used to it. It affects them there because then you feel bad or you feel like you're shunned or something negative between that friendship. So there is, of course, struggles between cultural differences. I think it's really about just understanding and being able to experience all these type of cultures to help us allow to get past these differences.
It affected me only with my extended family. For example, my lola, it's hard for me to communicate with them back at home because I don't speak Tagalog. So it's kind of difficult on the phone. You know, I'm trying to talk to them, but it's a little embarrassing that I can't speak Tagalog. I really wish I could, but there's that. Growing up, my parents never really expected me to speak to them in Tagalog. They would always just speak to me and I replied back in English, and that's why I can understand it, but I can't speak it. But I really wish I did.
I wouldn't say it's more so a cultural difference. It could also be a time difference, because the way how our parents grew up is definitely from a different mentality, a different upbringing. Because definitely it could have been more stricter, right? Because I'm pretty sure 2020 Philippines is more modern now. So I'm going to say the opportunities back then were more scarce for our family. So they probably had to be more diligent, more living on a stricter lifestyle, because they had to do what they had to do to survive, right? Which is why I'm here too. The factor of why I'm here, because it's part of their survival too, right? So definitely an upbringing from my parents. Like, they did teach me values that I'm gonna hold till I grow up, till later on. But I'm gonna say the biggest difference is probably the mentality that they have to what I have now, right? But that also comes with growing up as well too, right? So differences between me and my friends, I would say the ones that I grew up with that are Filipino, but they were born and raised back there, right? But then I met them here. I'm gonna say, in time, I learned, I didn't know what life was like as a kid or a teenager for them, for a Filipino back home in the Philippines. But listening to what they go through, listening to what they have now compared to the couple of years that they were able to go to school here, work a bit, yeah, it definitely makes you realize kind of how good we have it, depending on where they're from too, right?
I guess there are many times where, you know, the culture is different between me and my parents. Obviously, when they have things they like really believe in, and it kind of goes, it's not really to what I believe in, that's where you'll see differences. And that can manifest in small things, you know, in telling, if you're a boy, you have to do this. If you're a girl, you have to do this, because of, that's what, it's in their culture, right? But in Canada, maybe the gender roles or gender norms are different. So I think in things like that, you could really see the differences between cultures, and there's a lot of struggle there.
It was really beneficial for me. In the end, it wasn't really a bad thing. They weren't crazy strict where I could not go out at all. They were really lenient, and I feel like that relationship I have with my parents is good enough where we have good communication, and I'm able to still talk to them even though there's a cultural difference, and I can explain to them that I can come home a little bit later because this, and that, you know. But I definitely feel like having strict parents brought me up to be alive, honestly. I'm alive.
That's the thing that's beautiful about culture, because that's what makes it different from each other. You know what I mean? Every culture is going to have their own traditions. They're going to have their own point of view of how the world is seen, right? So I'm going to say, with my eyes through a Filipino perspective, it made me more respectful to other cultures as well too, right? It broadened my mind, my eyes to it.